Excellencies, distinguished delegates, welcome to the 11th meeting of the 6th session of the Working Group on the Strengthening of the Biological Weapons Convention. I hope that you all had a relaxing weekend, except those who were working. This is a public meeting being held in an in-person format in accordance with the regular practice under the convention. It's also being broadcast live on UN Web TV. Before continuing our substantive discussions, I would like to thank you all once again for the very positive and constructive feedback that you provided on Friday afternoon. A total of 31 states parties on that session explained the priorities and views on the key topics before us. And I was happy to note that several states parties echoed my call for flexibility, and I repeat, flexibility, from all the negotiations ahead of us. Several delegations have approached me subsequently to say how useful they found the stock-taking discussion, and I think it clearly demonstrated that widespread commitment within this room to forge ahead with our efforts to strengthen and institutionalize the Convention in all its aspects. We have an opportunity and we should not let it slip through our fingers. As we heard from Helen Clark last Monday, and as many state parties stressed in their statements on Friday, biological risks are growing, but the current institutional structure of and the resource provided to the Convention are not commensurate with those risks. This 50th anniversary year is a perfect time to correct this anomaly. Let us build on the positive from Friday and carry the momentum forward into our deliberations this week. Distinguished delegates, just a quick reminder of the plan for today. As I informed you on Friday, we will now continue with the topic measures on confidence buildings and transparency, as at least one delegation still wishes to make a statement on this topic. Once that topic has been exhausted, we will then move on the next stop on our agenda, which is measure on compliance and verification. As I mentioned on Friday, this is earlier than planned, but I would like to make maximum use of the time available to us. As I mentioned on Friday, following a request from the Friends of the Chair, I will bring forward the informal consultations on measures on organizational, institutional, and financial arrangements. These were originally scheduled for Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, but I would instead like to convene them this afternoon and on Wednesday afternoon around 4:30 on both days. So I would now like to continue with our deliberations on measures on confidence building and transparency. And I would like to give the floor to Indonesia. You have the floor, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Minister. At the outset, Indonesia wishes to convey its sincere appreciation to you and your team and Secretariat for the steadfast leadership and dedication demonstrated in steering this working group. Your ability to guide discussion through complex and at times delicate dynamic among delegation has been invaluable. We also thank you for the preparation and circulation of drawing text on measures on confidence building and transparency. Indonesia values your inclusive manner and constructive guidance, and you may count on our continued full support of your work. Indonesia reiterates the crucial role that confidence building measures play in promoting transparency, enhancing mutual confidence, and reinforcing cooperation among state parties. CBMs are also a valuable source of information to support national implementation and identify potential areas for assistance and collaboration. At the same time, we emphasize that while CBMs are a vital transparency tool, they cannot substitute for a robust verification mechanism, nor should they be used to assess compliance. Verification remains a cornerstone in ensuring universal adherence to the obligation enshrined in the BWC. Mr. Chair, we welcome the proposal contained in paragraph 14 to 19 of the rolling text and over the following comments. On paragraph 14, we support the establishment of a comprehensive CBM training program coordinated by the Implementation Support Unit. Such training modules should be tailored to the specific needs of state parties and developed in a close consultation with them. We also support streamlining CBM reporting by identifying overlaps with other national or international frameworks to reduce administrative burdens. With regard to paragraph 15, we endorse the idea of encouraging partial or step-by-step CBM submission for state parties facing challenges as a pragmatic way to increase participation and lower barriers to engagement. To support this, we support the ISU develop user-friendly templates and provide illustrative examples of partial submissions. On paragraph 16, concerning international assistance programs, we support integrating CBM-related activities into training workshops and capacity-building projects where applicable. Technical assistance should be provided to state parties encountering difficulties in fulfilling their CBM commitments. On paragraph 17C, regarding regional and national training, we welcome the proposals for regular training courses at these levels and support the establishment of a CBM assistant network. States in a position to do so are encouraged to contribute through voluntary expert nomination and funding. On paragraph 18, we support recommendation for a CBM review process to ensure CBMs remain relevant and responsive to technological, scientific, and political development. This process should involve inclusive consultations, allow sharing of best practices, and consider possible new measures to strengthening the convention's implementation. In addition to paragraph 18, we advocate for involving diverse stakeholders, including government agencies, scientific communities, academia, and industry in the review process. Concrete steps should be taken to establish regular communication forums to foster comprehensive understanding and collective responses to biological threats. On paragraph 19, we take note of the recommendation for the ISSU to make available information of CBM submissions to identify trends and assist state parties in assessing national implementation needs. We stress that the confidentiality and voluntary nature of CBM submissions must be fully preserved. In closing, Indonesia reaffirms its commitment to strengthening the BWC through transparent and inclusive processes. We stand ready to work with all state parties and the ISSU to ensure CBMs contribute effectively to building confidence, enhancing cooperation, and reinforcing the Convention's implementation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia. Are there any other delegations wishing to take the floor on the topic of confidence building and transparency? I see none. Thank you. We will therefore now move to the fourth and of the five topics that we are to discuss at this session of the working group, namely measure on compliance and verification. We have already discussed this topic at a previous sessions of the working group and a number of working papers that have been submitted by state parties. I would like to focus our discussions now on section D of the draft rolling text contained in document BWC/WG/6/CRP1. This section is based on the work of the Friends of the Chair on this topic. Ambassador Robert in Den Bosch, I thank you very much, of Netherlands, and Alonso Martinez Ruiz of Mexico, to whom I also thank, on the paper which I issued on May 6, and on feedback received on the non-paper from state parties since then. Paragraph 20 of section D sets the context by adapting language from previously agreed documents on the subject of compliance and verification, and contains the proposed recommendation to establish an open-ended working group on the subject. Paragraphs 20 and 21 and 22 set out the general mandate, aims, and objectives of the OEWG and and the overall goals of any methods, procedures, and techniques related to compliance and verification which the group might develop. The subparagraphs under paragraph 23 identify specific topics that is proposed. The proposed OEWG will address, focusing in particular on political, scientific, technical, legal, institutional, and financial aspects. Paragraph 24 adapts agreed language from the final document of the 9th Review Conference to make clear that previous work on compliance and verification should be taken into account by the OEWG. Paragraph 25 states parties are encouraged on a purely voluntary basis to conduct trial applications of possible compliance and verification measures and to share their findings with the OEWG. This is based upon similar exercise that took place during the VEREX and the ad hoc group, and which helped to inform the negotiations of the verification protocol. Finally, paragraphs 26 to 31 reflect feedback received from state parties to provide more detail on the modalities of the OEWG. We have therefore based these paragraphs very closely on the paragraphs in the final document of the 9th Review Conference, which established this current working group. We have proposed that the OEWG will meet for 20 days or 4 weeks per year, likely in 2 sessions of 2 weeks each. Anything less would not seem to do justice to the topic on compliance and verification. However, it's also worth remembering that the ad hoc group met for about 9 weeks per year on average during the 90s. So, following that brief overview of Section D, I would now like to open the floor for state parties to share their views on this drafted section. The floor is open. No comments? Panama. I think everybody's tired with the weekend. Panama.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Excellencies, colleagues. Before beginning the segment, I want to refer to the joint statement my delegation made in last week, and I want to say that the Dominican Republic has aligned with that statement, that was joint statement that we delivered. So that's just for the record, and the revised version will be put up on the BWC website. Now, in my national capacity and the theme before us, Panama has said many times, stated its support to establish verification measures. For example, during the third meeting of the working group, a group of states made up of Denmark, Kenya, Malawi, Montenegro, Norway, Singapore, Thailand, Uruguay, and my own country, Panama, submitted a working paper, 8, entitled Key Considerations to Relaunch the Debate on Verification and Compliance in the context of the BWC. We're pleased to see that elements of that working paper have been included in this section, in D, section D. Creating a credible, effective verification system is not a simple task, owing to the technical characteristics of biological weapons. Moreover, the convention faces unprecedented challenges in an era where emerging biotechnologies and AI have radically transformed the biosecurity panorama. Traditional approaches of verification and compliance are increasingly inadequate when it comes to tackling a complex spectrum of possible biothreats. Now, it's impossible to verify all biological research given its inherent nature of dual use. However, it's a fact that strategically evaluating what kind of activities could be considered risky and which could be in violation of Article 1 of the Convention is possible. It would also be important to adopt an integrated approach which addresses human, vegetal, animal indicators and environmental indicators, which is fundamental when considering compliance and verification. Our delegation in previous sessions supported the creation of a new working group to develop measures that would make up the verification mechanism. In that regard, we support paragraph 20 as currently drafted. With respect to 22, we think that group, the open-ended working group, the OEWG, it should identify ways of tackling various different situations be those related to biological issues, dual use, specific dual use, or with determined sites to be inspected. These references could also be included in paragraph 23. Now, on paragraph 23, on other occasions, we have said that verification measures should provide for 3 elements: declarations, periodic visits or routine visits, and inspections following reporting, which need to be, and we need to identify the verification mechanism that best responds to the specificities of bioweapons, and lessons can be learned from other verification regimes, and that could be adapted to this context, such as with the OPCW in the nuclear sphere, with the CTBTO, and other fora such as the WHO. Moreover, we've said that the annual reports on confidence building measures, or CBMs, can contribute to designing the verification mechanism as declarations or indicators for on-site inspections. And therefore, we support the paragraphs in that article, especially 23A, 23B, 23D, and 23E. In 23B, in addition to CBMs, there are other sources that could be included, such as the cases of reports on the international sanitary relegations of the WHO and the implementation matrices of Resolution 1540 of the Security Council, the UN Security Council. Turning to para C, 23C, we have certain doubts as to whether the current wording might generate potential duplication or overlap with other instruments. For compliance with and verification to effectively function, it is necessary to understand the appearance of bio threats facilitated by new technologies, which would obviously justify an ongoing assessment of the panorama of threats in cooperation with the Santi mechanism. And that clarification should perhaps be made that that is work which would be carried out in cooperation with the Santi mechanism that we propose establishing. In 23E, I think there is a need to explicitly identify the fact that development of capacities and technical knowledge when it comes to verification in the biological sphere, in addition to addressing all regions, should also offer equal opportunities, professional opportunities, educational opportunities to both men and women to ensure equitable representation and meaningful participation in activities related to verification. Para 24. Now, there are elements of continuity in the sphere of biosafety of the work carried out by the ad hoc group that was created in 2001, that many things have changed at a geopolitical, technical, and economic level, added to the growing threat of bioterrorism. Therefore, instead of looking back to the past, we must rather look to the future and bring in those aspects of that document that are still relevant in the 21st century. And that's an element we've reflected in the wording of 2024. We'd also like to propose a new paragraph, maybe a 29 bis, that would promote participation, full, equal, and meaningful participation in terms of the leadership of women within the OEWG. In para 20, beg your pardon, 31, para 31, we would like in the second line to delete by consensus. We would prefer the working group to operate with as much flexibility as possible, given that the ideal, of course, would be the adoption of decisions by consensus. However, we've seen that in practice, that consensus has been misused as a right to exercise power of veto, and we think that the different bodies that will be created should operate or function on flexibly. Finally, an aspect which isn't reflected in this section is how we can bring on board international organizations, academia, the scientific community, the biotech industry, civil society, and other interlocutors, including experts in life sciences, nanotechnology, biotechnology, AI. Since the success of this OEWG also will depend on the inputs that we can get from experts in the theme in question. Thank you, Chair, and apologies for taking too much time. No, Chair says no, it's okay. You have all the time you like.
China and then Indonesia. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Establishing a verification mechanism is the most effective means to ensure compliance and build mutual trust. We support Uganda and other parties for their statement at a session when they emphasized the importance of the resumption of the multilateral negotiations for a legally binding protocol dealing with all articles of the convention in a balanced and comprehensive manner, including through verification measures. In recent years, there has been controversy on compliance, which highlights the necessity and urgency for establishing verification mechanism. We welcome the substantive discussion on compliance verification in the working group. We support the working group making more efforts to focus on the substantive discussion on all aspects of verification mechanism so as to forge consensus and lay foundation for relaunching multilateral negotiation. At the third session of the working group, China submitted a verification mechanism of BWC under new circumstances, a working document to the effect, which in a comprehensive way present China's positions on this regard. Mr. Chair, the Chinese delegation recognize or appreciate the rolling text on measures concerning verification and compliance. We believe this will help the working group to reach outcome document on strengthening and institutionalizing the convention according to the mandate of the 9th Review Conference. In general, we support the content of the rolling text concerning verification and compliance. We have the following concrete suggestions on the text. First, we support the working group's suggestion on setting up an open-ended working group to discuss compliance and verification. China supports the OEWG, which ensures wide participation to meet in in-person format. Make decisions through consensus, produce report for submission to the review conference and special meeting of states parties. Second, establishing a verification mechanism can help early detect and deter intentional non-compliance, which provide institutional support for addressing disputes and studying non-compliance risk. We're of the view it is necessary in Paragraph 21 on the mandate to clearly show the content of the regime. This is a clear political consensus already reached, also for which there is a solid foundation for negotiation. Most of the countries, including non-aligned countries, emphasize that the lack of such verification regime poses a challenge to the effectiveness of the convention. Fragmented, optional, and voluntary verification measures have limitations and cannot replace verification regime. Therefore, this working group, it is necessary for the working group to regard establishing the regime as a clear target. Third, we suggest the regime, it requires a common coordinated cooperation, sustainable concept security. We need to coordinate development and security. In principle, we support Paragraph 22, where it mentions the criteria to follow for the verification measure, including providing reliable evidence, maintaining national security, sustainable development. Meanwhile, the future regime must deal with all articles of the convention. In the current text, compliance and verification measures should be clearly tied to specific obligations under the convention. This is the part that should be further clarified. The working group has put forward standards. This should not prejudge the result of the discussion of the group. Fourthly, the rapid development of biological technology has led to the lowering of the threshold for the development use of the biological weapons. At the same time, it has expanded the channel for verification. It has improved the accessibility and effectiveness of verification in the field of biology. On Paragraph 23, we in principle support that the OEWG should study the concrete measures, the declaration requirements, study ability, professional capability, and technology influence, etc. Meanwhile, we suggest that the working group should study the biological threat facing state parties, the risks to prevent, and the relevant definition and list. These are China's preliminary ideas on the rolling text. We are ready to have further discussion on concrete issues. Thank you.
Xixi. I have Indonesia, Netherlands, and Switzerland. Indonesia, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Allow me to convey Indonesia's sincere thanks to you, your team, and the Secretariat for guiding the work of this group with such dedication and clarity. Your able leadership in navigating this complex and sensitive discussions has been essential in creating an environment conducive to productive engagement. We also thank you for preparing and circulating the rolling text, including Section D on measures on compliance and verification. We value your inclusive and consultative approach, and you may rest assured of Indonesia's full support. We welcome the recommendations outlined in the report of the working group on compliance and verification. We affirm that robust, credible, and future-proof compliance and verification measures are essential to build confidence among states parties, deter non-compliance, and uphold the integrity of the Convention, including by ensuring that such measures are legally binding, non-discriminatory, and free of conditionalities while respecting national sovereignty. We welcome proposals in paragraphs 20 to 31 in which to make the following points. On paragraph 20, we underscore that a future verification regime must be robust and comprehensive, clearly distinguishing both prohibited and permitted activities. Clarity of scope is essential to avoid ambiguity and to ensure fair and consistent application across all states parties without discrimination. These mechanisms would need to balance effective verification capabilities with the protection of sensitive national security information and confidential proprietary rights, and be adaptable to evolving scientific and technological developments without impending legitimate peaceful uses. Such a regime should incorporate practicable and proportionate verification approaches with the support of capacity and expertise in the biological field across all regions, as reflected in paragraph 23G, and ensure transparency, equity, and inclusivity among all states parties, regardless of their level of capacity. Indonesia also welcomes the formulation of paragraph 21, which reflects our earlier proposal for an open-ended working group with a clearly defined mandate, addressing both the promotion of compliance and the development of a verification regime. We are encouraged that the text also incorporates consideration of political, technical, legal, personnel, and financial dimensions, thereby providing a balanced and comprehensive basis for future work. Mr. Chair, the design of any verification regime should be non-discriminatory, non-intrusive, and inclusive, and should enhance verification capacity across all regions. This will contribute to a ready-to-use pool of global expertise in the biological field, ensuring timely and effective responses. Such capacity building efforts should include training, technology transfer, and cooperative initiatives with relevant international organizations, academia, and industry. In this regard, international cooperation and assistance will be critical in enabling all states, particularly those with limited resources or technical expertise, to strengthen their national capacities for verification. We emphasize that verification measures should be adaptable to evolving technological, political, and security landscapes, and should be guided by scientific and technological developments relevant to the Convention, with the active participation of the scientific community and industry to ensure their effectiveness and practicality. In closing, Indonesia remains committed to working with all delegations to ensure that measures on compliance and verification contribute to the strengthening of the BWC and reinforces the integrity of the Convention. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia. I have Netherlands, Switzerland, and Italy. Netherlands, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. The Netherlands has been actively involved in the discussion on compliance and verification, not in the last place in our role as friend of the chair on this topic together with Mexico. Chair, you already referred to that. This intervention, however, is in our national capacity and reflects on the compliance and verification segment in the rolling text as we have it on the table or even on the screen today. In general, the Netherlands is supportive of the idea of an open-ended working group as described in the current version of the rolling text. Over the past years, we took note of a revived and serious interest of state parties in compliance and verification. We also became acutely aware of the limited amount of time we had in the working group to deal with such a complicated topic. As we often remarked, and you did it also again today, Chair, VEREX and the old ad hoc group had almost as many weeks per year as we have hours per year in the working group to discuss compliance and verification. Of course, nothing is for free. And we realized that an open-ended working group will have substantial financial implications. Therefore, we subscribe to the approach to discuss the matter in more detail, to get clarity on scope and mandate, as well as regarding the financial implications. Furthermore, a possible future open-ended working group would not operate in a vacuum. We believe an open-ended working group should be able to rely on an established S&T mechanism that is capable of feeding into the discussion the necessary insights about relevant scientific and technological developments. Chair, please allow me also to share a few observations on the text itself. In para 22, the formulation credible evidence of compliance and non-compliance is not something we principally oppose, but let me point out that this assumes a maximalist approach to compliance and verification, which could prejudge the outcome of the open-ended working group. Continuing, having a look at para 22, in the last sentence, we would suggest considering a change to the text regarding adaptability. Also, previous delegations already referred to it. The reason for this is that it currently focuses on adaptation, whereas we believe any measures should be made future-proof right from the beginning, taking into account the ongoing evolution of bioscience when designing measures. Our suggestion would be to delete the last sentence and replace it by the following. Any compliance and verification measures should be designed with sufficient flexibility to remain effective in an evolving threat environment. For para 23, we would suggest replacing the word address with consider in the chapeau. This seems to be a more open-ended way to approach the substantive items that follow. On 23 Charlie, we would prefer to delete it, since it does not seem to be the task of the open-ended working group to delve into specific S&T developments, nor to consider them comprehensively. Ideally, this is something in which an S&T mechanism would play a role. On para 27, we have no strong feelings about the number of days, since that will depend on the scope and mandate of the open-ended working group, as well as on the budget state parties will be willing to make available. Compared to the past, 20 days is a moderate amount. Considering present circumstances, it might be a lot. Looking forward to hearing the views of others, also with regard to the question whether they will be able to make available national experts for such a time frame. I think in today's BWPP report, the question is posed, how much to pay for what levels of effectiveness? I think this is an excellent summary of the discussion we are having so far. Chair, in concluding, in our view, the working group, while implementing its mandate, has successfully revived the discussion on compliance and verification that stood still for 2 decades. The Netherlands stands ready to continue contributing to this process and calls on other delegations to work constructively together towards agreeing recommendations to strengthen and institutionalize the Convention in all its aspects, including on compliance and verification. I would like to thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor.
Thank you, Robert, and also thank you for your work as friend of the chair. I have Switzerland, Italy, Russia, and Iran. Switzerland, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you for giving us the floor, Chair. At the outset, we would like to recall briefly our position on compliance and verification before we share our views on Section D of the rolling text. We have set out our main thoughts on compliance and verification in a working paper, WP11, which we submitted at the last session of the working group back in December. These considerations can be summarized as follows. For the purposes of the BWC, we believe that verification is the process of collection and assessment of data, allowing member states to fully evaluate compliance with obligations under the treaty. Here I would add a further 2 elements. First, in this context, verification is by definition a means and not an end in itself. And secondly, a verification mechanism must, above all, seek to ensure compliance with prohibitions, as stated in the first article of the treaty, to not manufacture or stockpile biological weapons or their means of delivery. On the basis of these considerations, we believe that a verification mechanism under the Convention could be structured as follows. It would be based on 3 pillars, the first being access to data collection through declarations. This would be combined with visits as a complementary source of information. The information gathered would constitute the basis of evaluation, and that would be the second pillar of this approach. If this evaluation identifies uncertainties or ambiguities, then more intrusive measures would be foreseen and implemented, and this would constitute the third pillar. This tool would also be available in case of allegations of use of biological weapons. Turning to Section D of the rolling text, first allow me to thank you and the Friends of the Chair for all of the work that you have done to draft this. I underscore that we welcome its general orientation. The discussions held within our working group on this complex issue can only be a starting point for a more regular process. In this regard, we welcome the establishment of an open-ended working group tasked with considering in detail issues relating to a potential verification and compliance regime. Discussions on such a crucial issue require a specific procedure. This would allow for the taking into account of the rich background and work already done on this issue, as well as scientific and technological advancements and their potential impact on a verification mechanism that is to be established. Regarding paragraph 21 of the rolling text, we are wondering if this should not be simplified somewhat. Some aspects relating to a verification mechanism seem to be specified in greater detail in paragraph 23. Regarding paragraph 22, I would like to reiterate our position that a verification mechanism must be based on compliance with negative obligations arising from the Convention, as stated in Article 1, as I mentioned previously. This could, of course, necessitate the adoption of positive measures, as indicated in Article 4 of the Convention. Now, paragraph 23 identifies several issues that the working group would examine, and we welcome its general structure. We believe it useful that the provisions of the paragraph allow for a sufficient level of flexibility to be maintained so as to address all measures which might be necessary to a compliance and verification mechanism, a regime that is. In this regard, we guarantee not excluding a priori any issues which may be necessary to consider during the group's discussions. Furthermore, it might be worth adding in subparagraph F that it is necessary to take into account already existing measures concerning this specific aspect of work. And it may also be worthwhile, for the sake of coherence, to to place subparagraph E at the very end of this list. Regarding paragraphs 27 to 31, relating to the establishment of the open-ended working group, we would like to make two comments here. Such an open-ended working group cannot be established rapidly, and in our view, or rather it could be established rapidly, and we believe it is not necessary to wait for the next review conference to take this decision. Regarding the number of meeting days to be allocated to the OEWG, the proposals made in the rolling text appear to be moving in the right direction. Allow me to conclude with two other thoughts which do not relate directly to the formulation of Section D, but which are important for future work on this rolling text. Advancing the debate on compliance and verification is a priority. This is an essential element to strengthen the Convention. We welcome the discussions last week on the potential recommendations that we could adopt, and it is important to recognize that a serious consideration of this topic cannot be done lightly. If the financial aspect is to be taken into account, it should not be an obstacle to making progress in advancing this work. Finally, while I believe it is crucial that the working group on compliance and verification should take into account in its work scientific and technological developments, we believe it is a good idea to separate this necessary effort with future activities of the review mechanism on scientific and technological developments. The latter is geared towards providing strictly scientific views, which must be separated from work on a potential verification mechanism, which, as we have seen many times in the past, would be characterized by discussions that are somewhat political in nature. Thank you, Chair.
Merci, la Suisse.
Thank you, Switzerland.
I have Italy.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to start with a general consideration. This is probably the thorniest issue that we have to discuss. There is no easy solution to the question of compliance and verification. We have made remarkable progress on the two mechanisms, and we should formally establish them. But we still have a long way to go on compliance and verification, and we won't certainly agree on concrete measures anytime soon, even less so on a compliance and verification regime. We have to be aware of this, and our mandate at this stage is simply to identify, examine, and develop measures and recommend something to the 10th review conference. So we need more time. We need more time than we have until the next review conference. And this is why we support the proposal contained in the rolling text to recommend the establishment of an open-ended working group. We'll make some general comments on that now, and perhaps we'll provide specific language at a later stage. And the way we see it, an open-ended working group should be established, of course, by the review conference. Your paper seems to suggest that it is indeed established by the 10th review conference with a report to be submitted at the 11th review conference. However, this open-ended working group could also be established earlier by a special conference, perhaps the same one that we could convene to establish the two mechanisms if we agree on having one such conference before the next review conference. We still have time for that. Our roadmap could be this: establish the two mechanisms, and at the same time, establish the open-ended working group on compliance and verification with the same decision. But if we fail to do that before the next review conference, we have to propose something at the conference that is not just the establishment of an open-ended working group. In that case, our goal should be to not only agree on the terms of reference and the mandate of this open-ended working group, but also to come to some general understanding on what type of system of compliance and verification we would like to create. The rolling text contains some useful suggestions on the way forward that we can already support, while other parts need to be further discussed and other elements are missing. We note with interest paragraph 23b on confidence building measures. We believe that mandatory CBMs, anchored in a peer review process to consider and discuss them, would not simply complement compliance and verification, but would actually be a key component of what we have been calling a composite compliance and verification regime. In paragraph 23E, we will not be against considering institutional arrangements modeled on what we have in the OPCW and the IAEA, but we will strongly caution against drawing parallels because biological weapons are much more difficult to verify and much easier to hide than chemical or nuclear weapons. So let's bear this in mind when we aim to create a complex compliance and verification regime. In paragraph 23F, we do not fully understand what is meant by investigative measures to look into allegations of possible non-compliance. Is this just about allegations or about investigations of a violation? The two things are different, because in this latter case, there should be a mention of the Secretary General's mechanism and how these measures would work with the mechanism and possibly support it and complement it. In this case, the need to have some balance between effective verification capabilities and the protection of sensitive national security information and confidential proprietary rights would be less strict. On paragraph 24, if the idea is to resurrect some proposals from the past, for instance, from what was discussed within the VEREX/ad hoc group, we would not be over enthusiastic. Of course, we're not against old ideas if they are still good, but we would caution against going back for solutions to an exercise that failed, considering also that so much has changed in the meantime. We need to have a new approach and look at this problem with a fresh pair of eyes. One thing that is missing here is a reference to the mechanisms. Almost 2 years ago, we pointed out the relevance of the mechanisms, actually, in order to make progress on compliance and verification. Let me repeat that argument now. If we had an ICA mechanism, we could ask you to help us achieve compliance of the BWC by enhancing states, parties' capabilities. For instance, by assisting them in ensuring the safety and security of their biological facilities. If we had an SNT mechanism, we could task it to look at the technical and scientific challenges of verification. An SNT mechanism could actually help us understand all the relevant points, such as what is technically feasible and what is not, which biotechnologies can be verified and how, what a given procedure would consist of, how inspections and investigations could be carried out from a strictly technical point of view. I'm not talking about the political aspect of verification, from a strictly scientific and technical point of view. What economic costs this would imply, what level of intrusiveness such a system could have. So we need scientists to make progress on compliance and verification. It should not be for an open-ended working group to consider things such as terminology, list of pathogens, threshold quantities, equipment, modalities of inspections and investigations, so on and so forth. We need sound scientific advice to look into all those technical issues and develop any consistent verification regime. And this is why we believe that we should have an S&T mechanism in place as soon as possible, as it would guide us through this process. Without one such mechanism and its science-based advice, and also without the dialogue with industry and academia that this mechanism could provide, no sound and effective political decision could be taken on verification. And this is why the roadmap for us is very clear. First, we establish the two mechanisms, then this open-ended working group, or we do that at the same time, as I said, with the same decision. So we should not go ahead on the open-ended working group if we don't have the two mechanisms in place. I thank you, Chair.
Grazie. I have Russia, Iran, South Africa, Austria, Australia, France, and Canada. Russia, you have the floor.
Distinguished Chairman, the Russian Federation sets great store in forming a verification mechanism for implementation of the BWC. The need for it is growing with every passing year in view of progress in such spheres such as molecular biology, virusology, medicine, veterinary sciences, pharmaceutical industry, and in the sphere of plants. So as a result of the development of synthetic biologies and technologies for gene technologies, gene editing technologies, it's become possible to synthesize and study new forms of bioagents. Using 3D imprints, it's been possible to produce under laboratory equipment under due control means of delivery and use of biological weapons. The problem of an absence of a verification mechanism under the BWC has become particularly acute with evidence of violations of the convention through biological activities by a number of countries, including outside their national territories. This situation confirms the need for consolidated efforts by the international community to strengthen the BWC regime. Together with the vast majority of states parties, Russia is convinced that effectiveness of the convention would be significantly increased if we adopted a universal, legally binding, non-discriminatory protocol concerning all articles of the convention with effective verification mechanisms. Claims by some delegations that the BWC allegedly is not verifiable and that work in this sphere is futile completely contradict the conclusions of the VERIX expert group and the special group of experts who came to an unambiguous conclusion that verification measures could be helpful in guaranteeing monitoring by countries upholding their commitments under the convention. We believe that the draft protocol, which is a result of the efforts of the special group, is as relevant as ever and could serve as a basis for future negotiations. It contains a number of conceptual provisions and practical recommendations which could be rethought by states parties in view of political and scientific or technical realities of this day and age. Moreover, returning to the mandate of 1994 with subsequent discussion of the creation of a verification mechanism, would facilitate strengthening the BWC and improving its institutional capacities. At the same time, significant work is needed in a number of key provisions in the protocol, including the terminology used, the list of biotoxins and agents, and the threshold level of biological materials and criteria for their inclusion in the list, methodical approaches to establishing equipment lists, conducting investigations and checks, as well as investigating possible violations of commitments under the Convention. Experts in the special group have noted that to overcome fundamental differences, what's needed is a single understanding of the terms by states parties, both when it comes to developing the convention verification regime and also at the stage of oversight and control. This in particular applies to precise, balanced understanding of the potentials of new technologies in the context of problems with the convention. The number of such could include production of additives based on 3D technologies, 3D printing technologies, analysis of big data analysis, and AI technologies, nanotechnologies and use of materials, automated biological research and robot technology. The ad hoc group's list of biological toxins and agents could be taken as a basis and updated by experts with a view to their universalization. The criteria proposed are still as relevant as ever today. Their formulation could include certain technical changes reflecting development of terminological basis in the sphere of biotechnologies, synthetic biology, and medicine. The ad hoc group experts also noted that one of the most effective ways to maintain oversight over biomaterials used with a view to develop and assess the effectiveness of bioweapons protections mechanisms is restricting the number of such materials that work is carried out on in biological facilities. We believe that the approach based on calculating the effective doses could be used for defining threshold quantities of new types of biological agents and compounds falling under the convention. With the appearance of new technologies achieving microorganisms and biotechnological substances using synthetic biology and directed synthesis, presented in the ad hoc group's experts list of equipment for facilities taking part in the program for bioprotection, includes a review, including when it comes to nomenclature. We're talking about equipment for working with any microorganisms and toxins, as well as materials imitating their characteristics. The ad hoc experts' methodology for conducting research into possible violations of international norms on prohibiting bioweapons could be adapted in view of modern-day standards for use of biological samples, instrumental elements of analysis, and clinical diagnosis. More detailed information on these aspects of a possible verification mechanism can be found in the Russian working document, which Russia submitted during the last session of the working group. It's on the Convention's internet portal. We are convinced that work on updating the ad hoc group's draft protocol on verification would be an important foundation for renewing negotiations on developing a verification mechanism under the Convention. Without such a discussion, the oversight mechanism will not be consistent with modern realities or meet existing risks and threats. In that respect, we welcome the proposal of the chair of the working group to include in the outcome report recommendations on instituting an open-ended working group on maintaining and ensuring compliance with commitments provided for under the Convention, obligations under the Convention. That group should carry out its work based on consensus. Its work should be of a comprehensive nature and include consideration of all aspects of verification, including the terminological basis, a list of bioagents and toxins, threshold levels for materials, for biomaterials. Establishing an OEWG would be a first step towards creating a fully fledged verification mechanism to strengthen implementation of the Convention and ensured guaranteed implementation of its provisions. With respect to specific provisions in Section D, there I would note as follows. In 21, which overall, we don't have any objections overall. As the mandate, we need to formulate clearly development of specific legally binding measures, implementation and verification of compliance and verification. Also, 23, where it talks about specific themes that the group could address. So this is 23A. So we think it's necessary as important factors or characteristics that need to be properly, that need to undergo specific inspection measures. These need to include mutual complementarity of such measures, as well as their effectiveness in terms of cost and financial cost. In B, we should be talking not so much about the value of the declarations, of the mandatory declarations, but rather the content of such mandatory declarations, or overall of such mandatory declarations. Such declarations shouldn't be called into question. These are an established integral part of the all verification mechanisms when it comes to disarmament, non-proliferation and arms control that are effectively used within existing regimes in that sphere. Turning to E, I don't think it would be wise to use selective references to activities of specific international organizations such as the OPCW. In our opinion, what we need, that wording needs to be more generalized without predefining any possible themes that might be used during discussions of such issues. In particular, avoid references to existing systems within existing organizations. Furthermore, that list of themes needs to be supplemented with a number of issues that we've already raised, including the need to include the theme of terminology, then the list of bioagents and toxins, as well as the theme of the threshold limits for biological materials. Such themes are inextricably linked to implementation of the key Article 1 of the Convention and must be considered before adopting the verification mechanism. We also think that it's redundant at this stage and paragraph 25 is very premature at this point. It's too early for it. Prior to developing tangible measures and procedures for verification without an understanding of their scope and their spectrum, we don't think it's possible to talk yet about conducting any kind of verification events or training measures in that sphere. Before establishing such measures, we cannot say whether we need or not these kinds of things, and if we do need it, what level, and aim, and with a focus on what specific events. So too early for that. Then para 26. It's crucial, we think, to include an understanding that that working group, that OEWG, would conduct its activities based on consensus. That's a crucial principle of the activities of any such expert fora, especially when we're talking about issues as serious as that of creating a verification mechanism under the Convention on the convention that addresses WMDs. That principle is there to ensure that we reflect the interests and positions and approaches of all states parties to the convention, and in so doing, ensure effective implementation and of that mechanism in practice. Para 27. We would prefer deleting the second sentence, which saying that the group should complete its work as soon as possible. I think we need to clearly stipulate its timeline and give the group time to carry out its work. Para 29, we should be talking not about electing a bureau of a chairperson and 2 vice chairs, but rather their appointment in view of the existing principle of consensus in that group. And then 31, I think it would be necessary to clarify, to avoid any kind of misinterpretations in future, that this conference could be convened, a special conference could be convened to consider the report adopted by that group at the request of the state parties. I thank you.
Thank you. Before I pass to Iran, I would like to encourage delegations to stick to the text and to the 5 minutes rule. Thank you. Iran, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Iran is also supporting wholeheartedly establishing a legally binding mechanism on verification and non-compliance. And of course, we believe that such a future mechanism should be apolitical, and every state party should have equal footing in front of it, and it should base its work on the authorized sources of information. We do not believe, and we cannot support any misuse of this mechanism for unsubstantiated allegations and to justify unilateral coercive measures. Unilateral coercive measures is, in fact, a clear breach of international law. We support referring and basing our work on the ad hoc group and VEREX, and we believe that again, such a mechanism should be comprehensive enough to cover all aspects of implementation of the convention, including activities on international cooperation. And having said that, we believe that it should not focus only on science and technological aspects of the implementation. And quoting from the final document of review, ninth review conference in 2022, paragraph 8, second paragraph of second part of the paragraph 8 clearly stipulates that these measures, I quote, these measures should be formulated and designed in a manner that their implementation supports international cooperation, scientific research, and economic and technological development, avoiding any negative impact. Therefore, as we mentioned earlier, all attempts to strengthen the convention should be with totally positive intention and avoiding any negative impact. From the beginning of this working group, Mr. Chair, we had the impression and expectation that we would cover addressing all agenda items, 7 elements of the agenda that this working group is assigned with. However, we understand that due to time restraint, there was not enough time to consider and come up with achievements like that we have seen or we are expecting for the 2 mechanisms. We, of course, know the complexity of the issue and the lengthy process that it needs, but in the meantime, just we wanted to put on the record that from our perspective, all elements of the agenda of and mandate of the working group should be dealt with equally and properly. And as we can assume that this bulk of the rolling text will constitute as terms of reference, mandate, and modality for the suggested OEWG, we think that it should again be comprehensive enough to set all the scene proper for the starting of the work of the OEWG. Therefore, coming to the text, we have some observations and suggestions that I'm going to share one by one. On paragraph 20, we see references to some terminology that we believe that are not relevant to the context of the BWC as a disarmament convention. In this context, highlighting arms limitation agreements, we don't think that it is necessary to bring it up in a text that will be essential for strengthening of the convention and establishing a mechanism on compliance and verification, because this convention is totally disarmament convention and there's no need to refer to arms limitation agreements. This is, let's remind ourselves that this is the beginning of this section, so it looks absolutely odd to refer to such a terminology. Likewise, the term satisfactory in the second line of the same paragraph, because the word satisfactory is totally an abstract term, and we don't know which level of satisfaction one state party will be will suffice for one state party. So in order to avoid any misunderstanding and different interpretation of satisfactory, we should base our work on the legal terms. And in this case, we should bound ourselves with the final agreement in which definitely it will have different components. So we should avoid referring to such a vague and abstract term. On paragraph 21, again, we believe that we need here more clarity, and therefore we'd like to add in the second line, with a view to establishing concrete regulations and provisions on compliance and verification measures. We think that this will help and will have added value in terms of clarity. And for us, it's very important to clearly mention that the method of work of the suggested OEWG will be consensus, like the ad hoc group of 1994. And we have suggestions on this effect for about other paragraphs of this section. On paragraph 22, we attach great importance to work only based on authorized sources of information. Therefore, other than timely, effective, and efficient fashion, credible evidence of compliance, we need to add authorized evidence of compliance as well. And we believe that the last sentence of the same paragraph should be deleted because, of course, we can understand the reference to adaptable to ensure future effectiveness, but we think that whenever necessary to adapt the mechanism, definitely the states parties can suggest and can propose to adapt such a mechanism. And we should work hard enough to establish a comprehensive one without any suspicious that it will need adaptation in next future or in very near future. So we think that this sentence is not needed here. On paragraph 23A, we of course welcome the approach on on-site and off-site approaches to verification, but in the meantime, consistent with our belief that the mechanism should cover not only verification and inspection, but also should verify compliance of the states parties with regard to, for example, ICA. So participating in ICA activities with a political approach, non-conditional and without discriminatory, should be another element that will have to be assessed in the future verification mechanism. 23B, we see the linkage to the CBM, but in the meantime, this highlighting mandatory declarations. So here we believe that for the time being, at least, there is no mandatory declaration, but for future, it can be part of verification mechanism. Therefore, in order to be clear, we should add future compliance and verification at the end of the first line of the paragraph. And 23D, complementarity, we don't need, especially because it refers to any proposed compliance, and we don't know which kind of compliance will be agreed upon finally. So we don't need that reference here. On 23E, we also cannot support singling out only two international agencies or organizations because of well-known reasons and because of the failures of and problems with regard to the performance of those organizations. So for us, those are not the ideal ones. And of course, we can work on a comprehensive basis of experience that we need to build up on, to build our work on that. And 23F, we see a reference to investigative measures, but for us also it's a question that how and what will be the relationship of the future mechanism with the UNSGM. Will we need UNSGM after establishing such a mechanism or not? This should be discussed properly. And finally, on this paragraph 23G, we believe that the expertise should come and there should be solicited from the states parties only. This should be the privilege of the states parties to participate in the pool of expertise to use for future mechanism, and non-parties should not be given such a privilege. And the global expertise can imply giving such a privilege to non-parties. On paragraph 25, trial, practice, application of compliance and verification measures, we think that this is premature, especially before conclusion of a legally binding instrumental verification. And of course, after conclusion, we can know on which basis the trial application could be utilized. Therefore, we believe that this can be also dropped. 26, we see the rules of procedure of the review conference to be applied mutatis mutandis for the OEWG, but here we have a point because we see that on paragraph 31, there is a reference to adoption of the report by consensus. From our perspective and based on our reading, it can be distinguished that whether consensus will be method of work during the whole activities of the OEWG or at the final stage. And we believe that for the whole process, we should utilize consensus as the method of decision making. And for 27, we, of course, see that the timeline suggested 20 days for each year. But in the meantime, we believe that we should think about intersessional process as well, that based on practice and experience, sometimes we need more time, and therefore it's better to foresee possibility of having intersessional process, either formal or informal. 29, about the composition of the bureau, we believe that the chairperson should be elected from NAM as the biggest group of BWC, and also one of the chairpersons should be elected from developing countries. And finally, on paragraph 31, we believe that we can finish the sentence after the 11th review conference and drop the rest of the sentence because it will add a hasty approach if we have such a reference to a special conference. Like this process, for some delegations, we should finish our work. We should have finished our work even earlier, but for some, it's important to utilize the whole time period and the duration of the time given to the working group. So we don't think it is that much essential and necessary to foresee possibility of adoption of the legally binding instrument on verification through a special conference, especially because we know that it will not be a short process. It will need a lot of time, and we are not even sure whether we'll be able to finalize our work by the 11th review conference. Of course, we are optimists and we hope to see such a thing. But in order to avoid any hasty and pressure of time on delegations, we don't think that it is necessary to have this addition here. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I would remind delegations that we have agreed on 5 minutes. So if you have long comments, please forward to us on written, on a paper. Otherwise, not all delegations will be able to talk. So I have to be polite to the other delegations. I have South Africa, Austria, Australia, France, Canada, and the UK. South Africa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. My delegation has the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the African Group. Thank you once again for your continued leadership and commitment to the work of the working group. We further appreciate the manner in which you have structured the discussions during this session. The African Group wishes to share the following in respect to the rolling text on compliance and verifications measures. Compliance and verification are fundamental to the effective implementation and realization of the objectives of the Convention. The absence of a comprehensive mechanism to monitor and verify compliance by states parties remain a significant impediment to the full implementation of the Biological Weapons Convention. Without such a mechanism, bio-related activities conducted by states parties risk remaining opaque, potentially leading to misconceptions, misperceptions, and mistrust. In light of the current geopolitical dynamics and rapid advances in science and technology, the African Group calls on states parties to engage constructively in exploring pragmatic and realistic measures to promote compliance and verification within the framework of the Convention. The African Group remains committed and ready to engage constructively in ongoing discussions within the framework of this working group, with a view to advancing efforts toward a credible and effective verification regime under the Convention, and therefore welcomes the recommendations for the establishment of the open-ended working group on compliance and verification. Key considerations on compliance and verification should be guided by the following principles: upholding the prohibition of biological weapons as enshrined in the Convention, promoting trust and transparency among states parties, contributing to international cooperation and assistance, remaining adaptable to scientific and technological advancements, ensuring that verification measures are realistic and tailored to the unique characteristics of biology, with due consideration to dual-use nature and the risk and opportunities associated with biological and toxic agents. And finally, being financially sustainable, taking into account the current status of the Convention. In this regard, the African Group supports the idea of a standby roster of experts that would be activated when verification needs arise. While acknowledging that no single mechanism may fully achieve verification or assess compliance, the African Group is of the view that the establishment of a comprehensive legally binding mechanism would significantly enhance adherence to compliance and verification obligations under the Convention. The modalities for such a mechanism should be elaborated in an inclusive, balanced, and comprehensive manner, ensuring that the concerns of all member states are duly considered and addressed. Ultimately, the proposed mechanism should ensure that states parties conduct their activities in accordance with the provisions of the Convention. It should also facilitate the timely detection of questionable activities, thereby promoting accountability and reinforcing the integrity of the Convention. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, South Africa. I have Austria, Australia, France, Canada, UK, and Chile. Austria, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. At the outset, also thank you to you and the friends of the Chair for the work on this highly important part of the rolling text. Austria considers verification a central element of all multilateral disarmament instruments. As a consequence, the long due discussion about the design and elements of such an instrument for the BWC is not only welcome, but must be seen as the by far most important part of our work and within the Convention. The BWC prohibits to develop, produce, and stockpile or otherwise acquire or retain biological agents and toxins of types and in quantities that have no justification for prophylactic, protective, or other peaceful purposes. Sorry for reading this out, but it's important. The challenges in meaningfully verifying this have not diminished, but rather increased over time. At the same time, we also have new and promising technological means at our disposal. In light of our discussions in December, we need to stress that our work must in no way undermine the general purpose criterion set out in the BWC and as read out. We need to repeat all activities that have no justification for peaceful purposes are prohibited. This increases the complexity of our tasks, but is not up for discussion, and I believe Switzerland argued into a similar direction. The crucial question is to what extent the compliance and verification regime can meaningfully assess the absence of biological agents for hostile purposes and the compliance of member states in a field that is characterized through dual use like no other. How ambitious should such a regime be, and what amount of resources is justified in relation to which level of assurance? And I think this is the work that we have ahead of us. To answer this, we believe that our discussion should recognize different verification measures and how to combine them in an effective verification regime. The ad hoc group worked on the basis of declarations, investigations, and visits. At the same time, the VERICs had extensively discussed different combinations structured as offsite and onsite measures. We should build up on this, but of course also look into the new possibilities that we have at hand. The chosen combination of measures provides us with the opportunity to effectively respond to the challenges that our regime has been and will be increasingly facing. It also allows for adaptation through the use of new technologies and new approaches to verification that are smarter, more cost efficient, and less intrusive. The verification of equipment, number of personnel, and square meters of laboratories and specific equipment may not have the same importance anymore. The verification of quantities of biological materials and the listing of toxins and pathogens need to be considered under the major changes that synthetic biology provides. As a baseline, we consider the sharing of information through declarations combined with on-site visits, including through periodical and challenge inspections, the most important part. Additional measures could complement such a structure to effectively deal with uncertainties and allegations. The specific modalities should ensure to safeguard information and at the same time avoid undue intrusiveness in an economically highly important sector. We are particularly interested in making use of the potential of modern bioforensics and the experiences of the OPCW. Mr. Chair, the amount of time we have at our disposal to discuss compliance and verification is extremely limited in relation to previous discussions on this topic, and we need to use it efficiently. Last year, we were able to hear from experts and other organizations on what is needed and what is feasible. We also had a fruitful discussion on the scope and objectives of verification measures under the BWC as well as the key features. It is now time to deepen our discussions in a structured way and in a dedicated forum. We therefore support the proposal to establish an open-ended working group for this purpose, taking into account past efforts and deliberations within this convention while at the same time acknowledging the evolvement of life sciences and the possibilities of the 21st century. Now going into the different elements of the rolling text, we have no specific comments on the earlier part on 20, 21 and 22. Going directly into 23, we propose to already at this point of this part of the text reflect the possibilities of new technologies and taking them into account. I think we can make an addition at the end of the text here, something that reads taking into account the potential of new technologies or something similar. We are open with the exact formulation. And we also believe that already in A, we should reflect the importance of the combination of different measures. Well, we are aware that this is in 23D, but this is, I think since this is the most important part on what we are doing, this should be reflected also under A. On 23B, we agree with the current formulation, but we also want to stress that declaration and CBMs are not the same and do not serve the same purpose. Work on declarations need to start from scratch or on previous work, but they should not, we cannot just simply transform CBMs into declarations. This just would not be feasible. On 23C, several delegations have pointed out that this is very similar to what we are doing under the S&T mechanism, but we also want to remind that especially the second part of this part or the overall purpose does not relate to S&T developments alone. There are also issues that are related to means of delivery or state behavior or developments in the life science. So a modified para 2 in this direction seems useful to us. 23E, we had a discussion about this already. For us, inclusiveness is highly important. We need the landscape in which we operate with thriving life sciences in technological and economic terms has changed. We need to allow civil society, industry into our discussion. We definitely need the OPCW and the IAEA, but we should also look into the work done and the cooperation with WHO, FAO, and other international entities, for example, also Interpol. I think this is highly important. 23F, This para looks into investigative measures in case of allegations, but we believe that the second part is also relates to other verification measures. So the most important part of F is the second part, and this should be a standalone issue on verification measures in general, and not just for the case of alleged investigations after allegations. At the same time, this is also important, so we could split this into two paras. Because it have come up, the relationship with the UNSGM, UNSGM will still be relevant for a long time, since not all states parties will immediately ratify this protocol, and therefore it's just a given that it should continue its highly important work. On 25, since we had a discussion on this as well, we consider this as an important part of our ongoing work in a possible working group. I stand to be corrected, but we believe such trials were part of the efforts also in the ad hoc group. Maybe the Secretariat can help us out and clarify if this is indeed true and under which modalities this was carried out. If it is voluntary, organized by states, or is a structured way of doing it. Para 27 is a crucial one. The biggest question for us is, when will this working group be established? In our view, it could also be established through a special conference at an earlier stage, since it is important to not lose time on this key topic. On the number of days, the form follows the function. So if we are indeed very ambitious in our approach, we could look into more days to mirror the approach that was done in the past. But of course, this also relates a little bit to the political aspirations that states have. The other question is the relation to the current working group. Verification also requires institutional measures, which are discussed under a different topic in the working group. And in the protocol, we also had, of 2001, there were also segments on national implementation, on ICA and other issues. So the question is, do we need a separate process? Is this included? And how do we relate these works with each other? On the discussion on paragraph 31, and sorry for being long, this is the last point. We think, or as far as we recall, this is the exact formulation from the mandate for VERICS. And so we believe that this could be still extremely valuable for us, having the option of a special conference and just using the same procedures that were set out in the third review conference for when VERICS has finalized its work, because this gave the VERICS report and the follow-up work a lot of flexibility and usefulness. And I think this is a best practice that we should continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Austria. I have Australia, France, Canada, UK, Chile, Algeria, and Spain. Australia, you have the floor.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. Like many in the room today, Australia sees the development of measures of compliance and verification as a fundamental aspect of our work towards strengthening the implementation of the Convention. It is clear that the verification regime would promote compliance with the Convention and build trust and confidence between states parties. The working group, for which thank you, has generated renewed focus and momentum towards the development of measures on compliance and verification. But we are still in the early stages of our discussion. While we can draw from the work done before us, more time and focused attention is needed to reach consensus on this complex area of our work. The proposal to establish an open-ended working group to develop measures on compliance and verification is, in our view, practical and realistic. It recognises that there is not sufficient time allocated to this working group for the work required to develop these measures and reach consensus, and instead proposes a concrete way forward. We agree that it is helpful in the rolling text to provide scope for the OEWG's work. At the same time, we do think it important to avoid being too prescriptive, to avoid preempting the group's work and its outcomes. As such, we would agree with the Netherlands, as we heard earlier today, that in the chapeau to paragraph 23 of the rolling text, we replace address with the term consider. We likewise support the textual proposal made by the Netherlands in respect of the final sentence of paragraph 22. It is critical to ensure that measures are formulated in such a way as to remain effective over time as technology and threats rapidly advance. We welcome Panama's proposals relating to inclusive participation, including the full, equal and meaningful participation of women. Such participation is one of the essential factors for the promotion and attainment of sustainable peace and security. The input of observers, including the scientific community, academia and industry, is invaluable because it helps inform our work. Finally, following Ishley's remarks, we are open to the potential early establishment of an OEWG on verification. We also welcome further discussion on how an S&T mechanism could help support the OEWG's work through scientific and technological advice relevant to the development of verification measures. Chair, we look forward to making use of the time remaining in this working group to continue our work on verification towards the commencement of an OEWG. Thank you.
Thank you, Australia. I have France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Tout d'abord,
thank you, Chair. At the outset, I would like to thank you on behalf of the delegation of France for the very meticulous work that you've done in drafting this section. Here we see that each word was very carefully weighed, and in this vein, France on the whole supports this section. However, we do have some minor amendments to suggest. In the first paragraph, we believe the expression disarmament and arms limitation agreements is too broad and goes beyond the scope of the convention. We would therefore like to strike through this reference and add instead recognizing that the Biological and Toxin Weapon Convention should provide for adequate measures. As a second amendment, we would also like to add the need to strengthen compliance and to deter non-compliance, following on from the paper that we submitted with Morocco, Belgium, and Hungary, where we specified several objectives and principles to be taken into account. We believe that this principle of deterring non-compliance is crucial. In addition, in paragraph 23E, we would like to stress the independent nature of the future organization to be set up. And therefore, here we would like to add the following reference at the end of the paragraph, and I will tell you in English.
Recognizing in particular the usefulness of a dedicated independent organization. Il s'agit là de garantir.
This is about ensuring that the future entity will be effective and acceptable to states parties and also impartial. We would also like to commend the way forward that you've proposed involving the establishment of an open-ended working group in the sphere of verification. We believe that this working method will ensure the inclusion of all proposals and will give us, as other delegations said, enough time to reflect on measures that are by their nature complex, but also which take time. Regarding the duration of the work of this OEWG, we believe that we need to strike a balance between the duration of the working days of this working group with all of the other working mechanisms set up, and also with other topics that are dealt with under the convention, to ensure, furthermore, that we are not overlooking other topics while still addressing this topic meaningfully, this topic of verification through the number of days proposed. This is a crucial topic for the implementation of our convention. Thank you.
Merci la France. Canada.
Thank you, Chair. I wish you and colleagues a good morning, even though it's close to being over. I also want to thank you, Chair, the Friends of the Chair and the ISU for their work in preparing this text. We generally agree with the text you propose. but we would like to make some comments and react to what has been said by other delegations. We agree with Switzerland that we should look at compliance with negative obligations under the convention. We do not see ICA as being covered by a new compliance and verification mechanism. ICA can be dealt with within the existing BWC institutional setup. We agree with Panama that consensus decision making by the working group should be removed from the text. Efforts should be made to make decisions by consensus, but the principle of consensus has been abused too often as a veto, resulting routinely in the imposition of minority views on the vast majority of states, particularly on procedural issues. The IEA and the OPCW take decisions by voting because vetoes don't produce results. In terms of past work, we can consider the work done by VERIX and the ad hoc group, but we need to do so cautiously. We should not repeat past failures, but look at the matter with a fresh perspective, taking into account advancements in technology. Regarding participation, we agree with those delegations that have advocated for a broad and inclusive approach to observers. We need to include all interested international organizations, as well as make the working group accessible to civil society, including with speaking rights. We agree with other delegations that the ICA and S&T mechanisms could assist us in making progress on compliance and verification. An open-ended working group could be established by a special conference after establishment of the two mechanisms. Finally, Canada supports the UN Secretary General's mechanism as long as there is no universally supported alternative instrument providing for an independent investigatory mechanism. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Canada. I have UK, Chile, Algeria, Spain, Denmark, Niger, and Belgium. So UK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. Given the time, I'll make some general comments only. The UK supports the establishment of an open-ended working group. We would like this to be an open-ended expert working group with emphasis on inclusivity and safe innovation. We think the open-ended working group is a sensible approach. We have not held detailed discussions on this topic for some time, and some upskilling is probably required. We also think that early agreement of the ICA and S&T mechanisms could maybe free up valuable time to focus more on compliance and verification. We particularly welcome the revised language in the text that makes clear that CBMs should complement but not substitute for compliance and verification measures. And I'd just note that any investigatory mechanism must complement existing structures and avoid duplication or any undermining of the UN Security General Mechanism's mandate. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, UK. I have Chile.
Buenos días, señor.
Good morning, Chairman. Once again, welcome the opportunity given to us to set out a technical opinion with respect to a theme so important as that of convention verification and compliance. Right now, the lack of a legally binding verification instrument has become a challenge to all states parties to the convention, especially in an environment where research, innovation, and development of biology and biotechnology advance at an accelerated pace, and it's necessary to corroborate the strictly peaceful use, the compliance of the specific peaceful use of such of its
results. In that regard, our delegation, within a strictly technical perspective, considered it possible to make certain ideas to this discussion, which we presented in a working document. In so doing, we can set out the following 4 elements, taking into account the specific reality of each state party. First of all, processes of proactive advanced transparency, which, in addition to declaring the reality and capacities of biological and biotechnological sciences, can publicly demonstrate internal oversight mechanisms and independent validation. Second element, the confluence between the scientific and security communities via integrated platforms for study and biorisk assessment. The third element, the distributed verification by building scientific oversight and monitoring networks following early warning system design as used when it comes to natural disasters and emergencies. And the fourth element is the ethic innovation associated to the Articles of the Convention related to science and technology, proposing screening of all research or development with the gold standard and with the gold standard and non-proliferation. Based on those ideas, it is clear that for there to exist an effective verification system, first, there needs to be a multi-level structure supporting biosafety, biosecurity, which helps bolster the technical approach through preventive forensic biology, scientific exchange based on diplomacy and reciprocal trust, scientific verification programs and emergency simulations of emergencies, disasters, or biological crises, and use of technologies to bolster processes for hearings, blockchains, and exercises in reverse verification. Finally, any guidelines for verification should be based on demonstrating adequate compliance with the Convention in all operative environments that exist in legislation of each state party, so that they can implement, oversee, and control related materials, intelligent transparency, reducing ambiguities, management of biorisks, meeting international standards, biosafety and biosecurity based on risk, technical strategic trade controls and security of logistical chains, fostering national credibility, and continued improvements to biosafety. Thank you.
Gracias, Chile. I have Algeria, Spain, Denmark, Niger, Belgium, and USA. Algeria, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Distinguished delegates, good morning. On behalf of my delegation, I extend our gratitude to you, Mr. Chair, for your able leadership and steadfast guidance throughout this session of the working group. We commemorate the 50th anniversary of Biological Weapons Convention entering into force this year, as the first international instrument prohibiting an entire category of weapons of mass destruction. Yet, it lacks a mechanism to ensure compliance and verification. In this context, we consider that verification is indispensable to guaranteeing the effective implementation of the BWC. Such measure must be universally applied, non-discriminatory, and respectful of all state parties' rights to harness biology for peaceful purposes. Our delegation advocates for an inclusive, comprehensive, and legally binding verification and compliance mechanism. This mechanism should strike a fair balance between security imperatives and the promotion of international cooperation as clearly stipulated under Article 10 of the Convention. Mr. Chair, my delegation believes that the outcome of the substantive work carried out by the ad hoc committee between 1994 and 2001 on the elaboration of draft protocol could serve as a solid foundation for our discussions on this matter. We therefore are ready to engage constructively in the ongoing discussion within the framework of this working group, and we take note on the recommendation for the establishment of an open-ended group on compliance and verification. This body should holistically address the political, technical, legal, personal, and financial dimensions of proposed measures, as per Para 21. We share the view that development of compliance and verification measures should be without prejudice to national security, sustainable development, technological, economic, or development interests of the state parties. Regarding paragraph 23's proposed agenda for the open-ended working group, we offer the following guiding principle. Verification must be legally binding, multilateral, transparent, and non-discriminatory. CBMs, while valuable, cannot substitute a legally binding verification regime. Measures of verification should carefully balance effective verification capabilities with the protection of sensitive national security information and confidential proprietary rights. We emphasize the need to support the development of verification capacity and expertise across all regions as per Para 23G. On Para 23C, the recommendation that the IAWG will address scientific and technological advancements appear to be a duplication of what was suggested for the SNT mechanism during the SNT session. In closing, Mr. Chair, my delegation stands ready to engage constructively in all discussions on verification and compliance within this working group. Should consensus emerge for the establishment of an open-ended working group, we are equally committed to contributing substantively in future deliberation. I thank you.
Thank you, Algeria. I have Spain.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Spain is firmly committed to strengthening the BWC. We think it's crucial, therefore, for the Convention to have a verification system. Scientific advances, technological progress in recent times in areas like biotechnology, AI have reduced barriers that limited the manipulation for handling of biotoxins and agents for weapons purposes, facilitating their proliferation. Therefore, we think it's crucial to create a verification process and robust monitoring with the adoption of tangible measures, pragmatic, realistic measures. With respect to make the following general comments on the text before us, the rolling text, our country welcomes the proposal to establish an OEWG on compliance and verification. That effort is a positive step towards bolstering the regime under our convention, guaranteeing compliance with obligations assumed by states parties, and promoting a climate of mutual trust. We recognize that themes of compliance and verification are of strategic technical complexity, which means we need to carefully draw up the terms of reference for such a working group. Especially, it will be necessary to clarify properly the scope of the mandate, avoid duplications with existing mechanisms, assuring at the same time that the work is consistent with the specific characteristics of the field of biology. We'd also stress the importance that any compliance measure needs to be balanced, factual, and respectful of the legitimate interests of national security, scientific development, and technological progress of the states parties. We call for a verification process that involves international experts with profound knowledge of bioagents, disarmament, and industrial issues, not to mention civil society as well. We reiterate the relevance of bringing the experts on board in this process, as well as academia, civil society, and the research community. Therefore, This group should have the support and cooperation of the science and technology mechanism, which we hope can be approved as soon as possible. Other more specific issues, sir, that we want to highlight are creation of this OEWG. I don't think it would be necessary to postpone it to the RevCon. We think it's vital for it to start its work as soon as possible. As to the number of days for meeting days, while it's vital to have sufficient time to address issues as broadly as possible, we need to remember the scope of the work and financial aspects and the money that's allocated there too. It's also important that in this forum, my delegation supports the mechanism of the UN Secretary General for research the alleged use of biological weapons and technologies as the sole international independent existing instrument to investigate currently the use of biotechnological weapons. Finally, we reiterate our constructive commitment to this process and in our vision that success here will depend on us achieving those two mechanisms on international cooperation on the one hand and science and technology on the other. Thank you.
I have Denmark.
Thank you, Chair. Denmark supports the development and adoption of specific practical and realistic measures to verify compliance with the BWC. In our view, verification is a process that requires a common understanding among all states parties. States parties need to find common ground on the objectives and principles guiding the verification process. As highlighted by Panama, Denmark jointly submitted a working paper on verification to the third session of the working group together with Malawi, Montenegro, Norway, Panama, Singapore, Uruguay, Thailand, and Kenya. And we are pleased to see that some aspects set forth in our paper have been taken into account in your rolling text. Chair, we support the establishment of an open-ended working group to explore concrete compliance and verification measures aimed at building confidence in compliance and deter non-compliance. We agree with the points made by Canada regarding the work done in the past. We do not see benefits in resuming prior negotiations on a BWC verification protocol concluded in 2001 for our future deliberations. But we do agree that we should incorporate relevant lessons learned from previous negotiations in VERICS and the ad hoc group. In our view, and echoing comments made by Switzerland and others, a verification regime should focus on the prohibition to develop, produce, stockpile, and otherwise acquire or retain biological weapons. Panama, we welcome the Chair. We welcome the proposals made by Panama related to inclusion and the full and meaningful participation of women, and further agree with Panama and also others that we could strengthen the language in the rolling text on the importance of including all relevant stakeholders, including the industry and commercial stakeholders, as well as technical and scientific experts. These experts can help us unpack the question of what to verify, including by helping discussing the potential threats and risks. In considering potential threats and risks, the current biotechnological realities, including the substantial growth in the number of laboratories and actors dealing with biological agents and toxins, should be taken into account. Mr. Chair, allow me to finally also highlight that we also believe that any verification regime must include provisions for safeguarding sensitive and confidential information, protecting national security interests while ensuring transparency and accountability. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Denmark. I have Niger.
Thank you, Chair. Niger aligns itself with the statement delivered by South Africa on behalf of the African Group. We would also like to commend you once again, Chair, for your excellent stewardship. As a general preliminary comment on this topic, we welcome your proposals contained in the rolling text under verification and the compliance topic. Last Friday, during the stock-taking exercise, we stressed the importance of the ICA and S&T mechanism, as we see these mechanisms as two pillars that will support the implementation of the whole convention. In this regard, We couldn't agree more with the distinguished representative of Italy. He eloquently elaborated on what we had in mind. So we second his development related to the role of that these mechanisms can play in the context of verification and compliance. We also welcome and support your proposal for the establishment of an open-ended working group. We particularly welcome Para 22 and would like to stress once again that the verification and the compliance measures should not hinder on sustainable development goals and development interests of states parties. These measures should be proportionate and balanced with regard to the prohibition of biological weapons and the right for peaceful use of biology. My delegation remains open to constructive discussions so as to reach consensus-based solution. And we would like to urge all delegations to engage also constructively with the aim to reaching consensus-based solutions. Thank you.
Merci, le Niger. Belgium, USA, and Venezuela.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Rapid evolutions in life sciences, as well as AI, lower the barriers to the misuse of biotechnology and increase their potential damage. Therefore, Belgium remains committed to strengthening the functioning of the BWC. Measures to improve, monitor, and verify compliance with the Convention would be significant improvements of the Convention in this regard. My delegation therefore welcomes the proposals included in the rolling text on verification. These proposals give us an opportunity to make progress in a field where we have failed to do so for over 2 decades. We agree with delegations that have advocated for starting these discussions with a fresh slate. This doesn't mean, however, that we shouldn't recall the lessons learned from previous discussions, such as VEREX and the ad hoc group. In our view, a verification instrument should take into account technological progress and other developments of the last 2 decades. A verification regime should consider contemporary biological weapons risks. Belgium remains a long-standing supporter of the UNSGM as the only existing independent international instrument for such investigations. Therefore, my delegation sees value in establishing a direct link to the UNSGM. In the same vein, confidence-building measures could be a point of reference, a sort of building blocks. The verification regime should work, among others, with international experts with a profound knowledge of biological agents. To ensure its effectiveness, we believe that the verification regime should undergo periodic reviews and be adaptable to evolving threats and technological advancements. We believe that the regime must include provisions for safeguarding sensitive and confidential information, protecting national security interests while ensuring transparency and accountability. In conclusion, Belgium supports the proposal to establish an open-ended working group on compliance and verification. We would like to echo the remarks made by the distinguished Italian delegation that by means of a special conference, this work could commence earlier. We also see benefit in a clear roadmap from the establishment of the SNT and ICA mechanisms, leading to a new verification mechanism. The proposed 20 days seem like a reasonable amount to us, in order to keep our discussions focused, our experts available, and our financial books balanced. We also agree that these discussions should be open to civil society, international organizations, academia, as well as industry representatives. I thank you, Chair.
Merci, la Belgique. I have USA and Venezuela.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our delegation appreciates the work by you, your team, and the Friends of the Chair to encourage meaningful exchanges on this important topic of compliance and verification over the past 2.5 years. To date, the working group provided a venue for countries to put forward new ideas on how to approach verification and to enhance compliance. However, the United States recognizes that more time is needed to discuss such a complex topic. This includes allowing countries more opportunities to evaluate the issue and prepare for these discussions through engagement with other relevant ministries in their governments, as well as engagement with other stakeholders that could be impacted and have insights, including civil society and industry. Substantive engagement by all states parties on this topic is important to make sure potential recommendations are shaped by a broad array of countries than by a select few. As such, the United States appreciates the work done by the chair to keep this discussion alive and for proposing to establish a future process to allow deeper discussions. To make progress on this topic, it is important that we take care in designing the mandate, scope, approach, and intended outputs for such a discussion. As such, my delegation has some initial comments on what is proposed in the current version of the rolling text. We see value in continued discussion on compliance and verification, including developing recommendations about what measures could be used to enhance effective verification. Similar to the distinguished delegates of the Netherlands and Australia, my delegation does not want to prejudge the outcomes of such discussions, and therefore we request the removal of language that gets ahead of states parties' deliberations. The United States is aligned with many others today in believing that we should focus our work on consideration of effective verification measures that focus on compliance with the BWC's core prohibitions, namely Articles 1 and 2, and that these measures be effective, implementable, and financially viable. My delegation considers provisions of the convention focused on national implementation and international cooperation and assistance to be a distinct issue. My delegation believes that starting with a fresh, forward-looking approach when developing and considering measures for effective verification is critical in the context of 21st century biological weapons threats, similar to what has been raised by many delegations throughout the discussion today. Scientific and technological advances have changed how science is conducted and have greatly expanded scientific capabilities in the area of the biological sciences compared to when states parties last discussed this topic seriously over 25 years ago. We need to ensure whatever approaches we consider are suited for current and future threats, not only those of the past, and are tailored to the biological context, which, as many have noted, is different from that of chemical and nuclear weapons. Similar to the distinguished delegate from the Netherlands, my delegation is conscious about the cost for future intersessional work and seeks to make sure the time allotted for future discussions is appropriate to effectively and efficiently carry out its mandate. Chair, with that, we look forward to continuing to support you and your work, and I thank you.
Thank you, USA. I have Venezuela, Thailand, and Nicaragua. Venezuela, you have tu tienes la palabra.
First of all, thank you very much, Chairman, for giving me the floor. I'd like to greet all delegations here, and we trust that this new week of work will be fruitful. The entry into force of the convention was a historic moment in development of the path towards complete disarmament, preventing the use of WMDs. Nevertheless, a number of decades after negotiations for the adoption of a legally binding protocol were interrupted by one state party, legal shortcomings of the convention have become increasingly clear. Those shortcomings have been aggravated by the global context, which faces new complex challenges when it comes to peace and security. We would like to stress the importance of renewing multilateral negotiations for the adoption of a legally binding protocol that addresses verification and compliance of all provisions of the convention in a balanced, exhaustive fashion. We think those measures are cross-cutting to the mechanisms that we propose to establish. The absence of a verification regime is a direct challenge to the effectiveness of the convention. Therefore, we urge the international community to state a clear, determined political will to allow us to advance in that direction. It's timely to stress, moreover, that the lack of a verification regime is related in and ultimately undermines the integrity of the convention. Recent advances in biosecurity stress the need for negotiations on a verification regime to be concluded to address breaches in compliance is under the BWC. On your document, we welcome the mention in para 21 of an internationally binding instrument, but the wording gives the idea that we are trying to diminish the need for such an instrument. We agree with Iran that those mechanisms should be apolitical to avoid any opinions that, rather than promote, undermine the participation and sovereignty of states. Furthermore, we agree with the need to reflect in the text that any verification measure should be fully coordinated with the state concerned. On the working group, we've taken note of the proposal, taking into account that it still requires greater discussion to clearly define the structure of such verification measures. In conclusion, my delegation reiterates its willingness to move forward on the themes before us. As was stressed, the goal of our working group is to generate adequate recommendations to ensure the comprehensive strengthening under a constructive, non-discriminatory, consensual approach, consensus between all member states. Thank you.
Gracias, Venezuela. I have Thailand and Nicaragua. Thailand, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, at the outset, Thailand wishes to recall the working paper that Thailand submitted together with Denmark, Kenya, Malawi, Montenegro, Norway, Panama, Singapore, and Uruguay on this topic as a basis for the discussion on the measures on compliance and verifications. Like others, we see the measures on compliance and verifications as a tool to reinforce the obligations under other topics. We should incorporate lessons learned from the work of Vertex and ad hoc working group in the past, but not to resume the negotiation. Thailand agrees with Switzerland, Denmark, and other delegations that the verification mechanism should cover only the obligation under Article 1, 2, and 3 of the BWC, as compliance to the national implementation under Article 4 can be enhanced to other methods. Thailand shares the view that with the limited of time, the working group might not be able to reach consensus on establishing verification mechanism. We therefore welcome the recommendation to establish the open-end working group as a sensible measure. We agree that at this stage, the scope of the working group should not be too descriptive. Thailand agrees with our colleague from the Netherlands and Australia that the list in paragraph 23 should be non-exhaustive list and welcome suggestion to change the word address to consider. Furthermore, the OEWG should not operate in vacuum. We support the suggestion that it should work closely with the mechanism on SNT and also UNSGM. Finally, regarding the participation, we support Panama's suggestion to enhance meaningful participation of women as well as expert input from international experts, academia, and civil society in the work of OEWG. And thank you.
Thank you, Thailand. I have Nicaragua and South Africa. Nicaragua, tienes la palabra.
Nicaragua has the floor. Thank you, Chairman. For my delegation, it's important to stress that given the current environment, the importance, we need to move towards negotiating and adopting a legally binding protocol given this current state of biotechnological advances, which requires a compliance verification regime. It's positive to include the proposal to create an open-ended working group regarding that theme, with a legal regime for effective valence and verification to provide confidence on peaceful preventive measures, and would provide a bioethical security non-proliferation framework with openness to scientific progress, whose discussions should be led by consensus. We think that in discussions, we can pick up the proposals made by the ad hoc group and the BERECs, as well as contributions from multiple delegations during the working session of that group. Finally, we agree with the delegations who referred that there is no need to make undue pressure on delegations when it comes to discussing issues. We welcome the horizon of 2026 in line with the mandate as giving sufficient time for negotiations, for discussions based on the text proposed by the chair. Thank you.
Gracias, Nicaragua. I would like to remind you that even heads of states have time to speak. South Africa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. South Africa extends its appreciation to you for the rolling text proposed for consideration by states parties and welcomes the continuation of the discussions on this important topic on compliance and verification. My delegation also aligns this intervention with that of the Africa Group. South Africa is in full support of the mandate given to this working group by the 9th Review Conference of the BWC, where states parties are to identify, examine, and develop specific and effective measures, including possible legally binding measures, and to make recommendations to strengthen and institutionalize the convention in all these aspects. Chairperson, the absence of discussions on the issues of verification for such a lengthy period has made it urgent for this working group to enable a conversation that will facilitate the identification of concrete and practical verification measures. South Africa regrets the lack of progress on this important matter, but believes that the time is right for this working group to identify concrete and practical measures, including those of a legal binding nature, and to take into account possible unique challenges of a verification system under the convention. South Africa has always been supportive of the resumption of negotiations on a legally binding instrument to strengthen the convention, including appropriate and effective verification measures. South Africa has also supported the CBMs as an important tool of transparency in the absence of a verification protocol, and has furthermore considered consultations under Article 5, when appropriate, as a tool for dialogue in the absence of a verification or compliance mechanism under the convention. While these tools have enabled us to function in the absence of a proper verification system, they cannot serve as a measure of ensuring compliance. Chairperson, South Africa believes that an agreement on a suitable verification system under the BWC is paramount to adequately and effectively enforce the norm of prohibition established by the convention. Only compliance and verification mechanism will ensure the full and effective implementation of the convention. Measures to be identified by this working group would be necessary and necessitate that they be adopted to suit the realities of the life sciences today and the new technological advances. Such measures should provide confidence, accuracy, and agile solutions to possible problems that may arise from actions taken by states parties in their endeavors to implement the provisions of the convention. These measures would enable us to not just technically adhere with the convention, but also reflect willingness in compliance with the convention. Any proposed measures will encourage actions to be taken in good faith by states parties, in particular to advance the peaceful use of biotechnology, while simultaneously preventing the use of biological weapons, be it by states or non-state actors. Chairperson, South Africa welcomes the rolling text as it was instrumental in advancing the conversations on compliance and verification. In this regard, South Africa would like to highlight from the rolling text the importance of the following elements for discussion. One, the establishment of an open-ended working group open to all states parties as a positive step forward for advancing discussions on the issue of compliance and verification with the aim of establishing concrete compliance and verification measures, including possible legally binding measures aimed at confidence building in compliance and detecting a deterring or non-compliance with the convention. The consideration of the way on the way a specific mechanism on compliance and verification can be proposed, including a clear proposed scope and nature of the mechanism. In this regard, South Africa agrees that, in principle, the proposed working group could consider the following. A, the submission of mandatory declarations in the context of compliance and verification. These discussions on declarations would have to consider the role of CBMs and whether they could be replaced by declarations. B, both on-site and off-site methods of verifications, their feasibility and the form they would take in the BWC context. C, the possible requirements for institutional arrangements, both of a technical and political character, as well as their financial implications. D, the potential investigative measures to rapidly and credibly look into allegations concerning possible non-compliance with the provisions of the convention, while noting that such measures should carefully balance effective verification capabilities with the protection of sensitive national security information and confidential measures. And lastly, the need to support the development of verification capacity and expertise in the biological field across all regions, contributing to a ready-to-use pool of global expertise. We note the activities in other bodies such as the UNSGM to develop such capacity and further highlight the need for synergy with such activities without duplication. Chairperson, South Africa will remain flexible on the number of days for meetings and the organizational work of the open-ended working group. However, our delegation would prefer that a target date for the completion of the work be given to the working group and that the work be completed not beyond the 11th review conference. My delegation appeals to all delegations to exercise flexibility to secure progress towards the strengthening of the convention. We further take this opportunity to assure you of South Africa's commitment and support to the realization of the full implementation of the convention and avail ourselves to engage constructively in the coming days. Thank you.
Thank you, South Africa. I have Ireland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor. And we join others in thanking you for this particularly important section of your rolling text on compliance and verification measures, and to the Friends of the Chair for their work on advancing this issue. Regarding the rolling text, we fully support your proposal to establish an open-ended working group on compliance and verification. Over the last couple of years, we have extensively discussed at a high level varying aspects of compliance and verification, including purpose, scope, potential measures, and impact of new technologies, to name a few. These discussions have benefited greatly from a number of working papers submitted by states parties. We've developed a clear understanding of where delegations stand on these and other aspects of compliance and verification, and we believe it's time to hold more focused, structured discussions to take these discussions to the next step. We welcome the reference to the previous work on this topic in the BWC's history. As ourselves and many others have said, it's important we do not start from scratch, but we must also be conscious not to fall under the same obstacles that prevented progress on this issue in the past. We should build on this work while looking at new evolutions and developments in biosciences and verification measures. We have to take into account new realities, including how they may no longer be useful to consider as was attempted in the 90s, such as developing specific lists of pathogens which continue to evolve on a weekly basis. It would be more useful to specify groupings of pathogens and processes by functionality, for example. We note that many of the elements for discussion under paragraph 23 would benefit greatly from updated understandings on science and technology, and to that end, we reiterate our call for compromise and swift establishment of the S&T mechanism, as well as the ICA mechanism. We also echo others in including the importance of meaningfully involving the expertise from civil society, intergovernmental organizations, industry, and academia. As we mentioned last week, involving these stakeholders in our discussions will be critical towards achieving effective outcomes. We underline that the majority of biotechnology and advanced technology occurs in the non-state sector. Excluding their views would greatly hamper the OEWG. And this is all the more vital as barriers to knowledge and access to tools continue to lower. We will need their involvement. We support Panama's proposal as well with regard to the importance of the full, equal, and meaningful participation and leadership of women in the OEWG, and support Panama's textual proposal to this end. We also note Canada and Panama's points regarding the suggestion to remove consensus in paragraph 31. We need to face up to the fact that consensus in practice has meant veto and unnecessary delay in our work. Regarding process, if this OEWG would only be established at the 2027 review conference, we believe we would need some more structured and focused discussions in the interim within this working group. Ideally, we would be in a position to soon convene a special conference to establish this OEWG, as well as the S&T and ICA mechanisms, as others have said this morning. Otherwise, we should explore other options to make best use of our time. On the number of days for this OEWG, as others have said, form follows function. This can be decided once we find agreement on the scope of the OEWG, and we should be flexible to allow the appropriate number of days necessary for this complex topic, taking into account financial considerations. Finally, we add our voice to those with regard to the continuing support for the valuable work of the UN SGM. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ireland. Do I have any other delegation? Peru?
Norway.
Norway and Peru, or Peru and Norway. It's Norway, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Norway is supportive of measures to move deliberations forward on the topic of compliance and verification. The rolling text has many components that will contribute to this end. Some overall considerations regarding Section D from my delegation. Norway is supportive of an open-ended working group that is mandated to work on these compliance and verification measures, including dimensions of political, technical, legal, personnel, and financial nature. Our delegation supports discussions and engagement that build confidence and trust in the context of verification and compliance. We support efforts that deter non-compliance and those that help state parties address on how to respond, when necessary, to non-compliance. Norway also strongly encourages that state parties actively look to what works in terms of enhancing compliance and efforts that strengthen our collective engagement and work on verification. We welcome language in the working group's recommendations that include this encouraging outlook that help us also build on what works for state parties in compliance and verification. As mentioned by our colleague from Niger, we also see that establishment of the S&T and ICA mechanisms will contribute positively to work on verification and compliance in order to implement these provisions. We support the involvement of scientists and other stakeholders, including international organizations, academia, the industry, and civil society. Norway acknowledges the rapidly evolving scientific and technological environment and expects that the future may hold useful advances for our verification and compliance measures. As such, where appropriate, we see value in supporting the inclusion of language that specifically acknowledges these likely scientific and technological improvements and their application to future improvement efforts in compliance and verification. Norway sees great value in learning from other implementing agencies in the disarmament field that have compliance and verification regimes, including the IAEA and OPCW. We encourage reflections from their successful experiences. In deliberations moving forward, we see the need to clarify the organizational and administrative relationships where needed between the open-ended working group and the S&T Review Committee, the ISU, OPCW, and IEAE, and the work on confidence-building measures. Lastly, we appreciate all state parties' work to move these efforts forward. Thank you, Chair, and the team.
Thank you, Norway. I have Peru and Kenya. Peru, tienes la palabra.
Give the floor to Peru. Thank you. Much appreciated. Chairman, my delegation is grateful for the work carried out in preparing the set of recommendations that tackle comprehensively a theme as complex and as compliance and verification of the Convention. Peru in particular appreciates the proposal to establish an open-ended working group. We think that would ensure the inclusion and transparency in a debate which needs to be perforce participative. We also acknowledge the merit of the mandating, providing for technical, political, legal, and financial aspects, and that specific reference be made to relevant experiences such as those of the OPCW, the IAEA, without losing sight of the unique specificity of the field of biological weapons. Similarly, we welcome the emphasis in developing capacities and the need to have a global expert pool to support all states parties, especially those with greatest technical limitations and/or resources. At the same time, we'd like to formulate as a suggestion that verification and compliance measures should be credible but also viable and proportional. Therefore, it would be useful if the mandate of that working group could incorporate language that ensures a balance between effectiveness of the mechanisms and the protection of sensitive information, both in terms of national security and intellectual property. This would help generate the necessary trust among states parties and would incentivize their active cooperation. Similarly, we support the proposal for states to voluntarily test out verification measures together with the relevant industrial and academic sectors. We think that lessons learned from those practical experiences could serve as a valuable basis for multilateral discussions. Finally, as stated by Panama in paragraph 23E, it would be important to include a reference to equal opportunities between men and women for capacity development. In conclusion, my delegation supports the general gist of this packet of recommendations, convinced that that packet marks a significant step towards giving our convention more robust verification and compliance mechanisms, enhancing its credibility and effectiveness in the face of the challenges of the present and of the future. Thank you. Thank you, Peru.
I have Kenya, Korea, and Cuba. Kenya, have the floor.
Distinguished Chair, Excellencies, respective delegates, Kenya aligns with the statement delivered by South Africa on behalf of the African Group. Kenya also acknowledges that support for the BWC implementation ensures that life sciences remain a force for good as envisaged in Article 10, and that risks of bioterrorism are minimized, hence safeguarding global health and stability and development. Mr. Chair, my delegation underscores the words in the rolling text that adequate measures of verification that satisfy all parties are necessary to create confidence and ensure that all parties are observing them. By all parties supporting such measures implies global preparedness for protection against biological threats. We understand that biological weapons can cause widespread and uncontrollable harm to humans, animals, plants, and the environment. As the working group endeavors to find adequate mechanism for verifying compliance with the convention, systems to review emerging technologies and assessments for their potential risks to biosafety and biosecurity are necessary. We must also consider the emergent reality that many terrorists, organizations, and other non-state actors can exploit advances in life sciences to develop biological weapons. It is alarming that at present, the convention lacks specific measures to combat such threats, and for Kenya, this is an issue that deserves utmost attention. Mr. Chair, Kenya acknowledges that for effective implementation of BWC, best practices from the Chemical Weapon Convention can be mirrored, especially in the use of modern technologies as implied in the rolling text, paragraph 23E. It is possible to develop verification mechanism for BWC. The Chemical Weapon Convention leverages satellite imagery, environmental samples analysis, and a network of designated laboratories for off-site evaluation of samples, maintain a strict chain of custody and proficiency standards. The lesson for BWC is that many of these tools have advanced, including the bioforensics and open source intelligence, and can be adopted for bioverification today. Integrating such technologies can increase verification effectiveness, especially where dual use overlap complicates intent assessment. Mr. Chair, Kenya recognizes the content in the rolling text paragraph 23F and G that the potential investigative or general verification measures should carefully balance effective verification capabilities with the protection of sensitive national security information and confidential proprietary rights. Kenya supports developments and strengthening of verification capacity and expertise in the biological field across all regions, contributing to the ready-to-use pool of global expertise. Strengthening national capacity and expertise should also be encouraged to enhance the national implementation of the convention. A similar approach, such as the United Nations Secretary General mechanism, may be followed or integrated in the strengthening such capacities and expertise. Finally, it should be noted that building verification and compliance measures will be evolving with time as more frontier technologies emerge. Due to their dual-use nature, the open-ended working group proposed may consider strong cooperative verification with strong trust among countries and organizations, since joint data and multilateral auditing will be required. Establishment of transparent reporting structures will increase effective verification, while detecting and deterring non-compliance is important in reinforcing international peace, security, and trust among state parties. Kenya advocates for institutionalization of such mechanism to ensure sustainability and support for capacity building according to the needs of individual states as a means of strengthening national implementation of the convention. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenya. I have Korea and Cuba. Michael, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My delegation welcomes and appreciates your proposal contained in Section D of the rolling text, including the establishment of the open-ended working group. The Republic of Korea believes it is essential to build a common understanding among state parties before engaging in a discussion on the complex challenge of compliance and verification. Too often in our disarmament community, OEWGs have failed to make progress because member states began their work with different understandings. The OEWG on compliance verification should avoid repeating such failures. The OEWG on compliance verification, we stress the need for shared understanding of each mandate, modalities, and possible outcomes before we decide to establish such a body. In this regard, we support the comments made by Netherlands, Australia, the US, and Thailand that we should not prejudge the outcome of the OEWG in the chapeau of paragraph 23. Given the rapid development of science and technology, as many delegations have noted, my delegation attaches great importance to studying and developing scientifically grounded measures for compliance and verification. At the same time, we underscore the importance of safeguarding sensitive national security and commercial information in the implementation of such measures, as highlighted by previous speakers. This concern can be reflected in paragraph 23 as a separate item. We also value the inclusive participation of relevant stakeholders, including academia and industry, who may be directly affected by future measures. In this respect, we support Panama's proposal to include a paragraph, possibly after paragraph 26, inviting and confirming broad stakeholder participation. The Republic of Korea looks forward to further discussions on this important matter and will continue to engage constructively. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I have Cuba now.
Gracias.
Thank you, Chairman. The Convention reflects the obligation of states parties to consult and cooperate among themselves to resolve any problem that might emerge with respect to the objectives of the Convention or the application of its provisions. Nevertheless, the mechanisms established to guarantee compliance have proven to be ineffective. The isolated proposals and initiatives of those who emerged in the margins of the conference haven't been able to strengthen the convention in all its aspects, nor to commit all its state parties to the comprehensive strengthening of the convention. This can only be achieved via a multilateral, non-discriminatory, legally binding protocol that implements and develops all the articles of the convention in a balanced, comprehensive manner, which includes verification members. The work of that working group should impact directly towards achieving institutionalization of the convention, prioritizing the aspiration to reach a legally binding instrument to foster the comprehensive, balanced, non-discriminatory implementation of all the articles of the Convention. Any instrument adopted should address all articles of the Convention in a balanced overall fashion, take into account inter alia the following elements: a list of bioagents and toxins, relevant facilities that are relevant to the convention, a comprehensive verification regime, a dispute resolution mechanism when it comes to the alleged use of biological weapons or non-compliance of the convention, and an instrument to identify obstacles towards the full implementation of Article 10, including coercive unilateral measures, universal blockade measures, among others. The debates we are holding in the context of this working group are of great relevance for the future of the convention, discussing constructively, seeking consensus solutions, and addressing the legitimate interests of all state parties will be a key element to achieve the results that we hope to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other delegation? Yep. Switzerland? Huh?
I can give the word to Switzerland if you want, Chair, but otherwise Sweden would like to say just a couple of words.
No, it's far away from me to read the thing. So you have the floor, sir.
The importance of me also ending as soon as possible, preventing people from having lunch. And in that sort of same aspect, I think on para 27, we should still say that the working group, open-ended working group, should complete its work as soon as possible. I think that is an important aspect to our work. Overall, Chair, I would like to say that Sweden welcomes the text that you have provided on compliance and verification, and we then also support the establishment of an open-ended working group. We would, though, like to add that the initial working days be set to 10 days until that we see that the working group gets going and provides substantive output. We also want to support the statement by Panama and others with regard to broader stakeholder participation, equal opportunities, and as well not to use the consensus approach on procedural matters in the new open-ended working group. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sweden, and sorry for misleading. Any other delegation? I don't think it's the case. So, thank you. We seem to have exhausted the list of speakers for this morning's session on this topic, and we'll return to it when we reconvene at 3 o'clock this afternoon. We'll continue further on this topic until approximately 4:30, when we will switch to informal consultations on the topic of measures on organizational, institutional, and financial arrangements. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Fix for any administrative announcements. Mr. Fix, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of things from our side. First of all, I would just like to go back to, there was a question from the delegation of Austria directed to the Secretariat earlier about the practice and trial inspections and other verification exercises that took place during the ad hoc group, and the delegate of Austria is correct. There were such activities that were organized both during the VEREX and also during the ad hoc group as well. They generally seem to be from our research national activities, either conducted by a single state party or jointly by a group of states parties. There were actually also a series of working papers that were submitted on those, the kind of outcomes of those exercises as well. So you can find 5 working papers submitted to VEREX, 1 that was submitted to the special conference, and a total of 15 working papers on various different exercises that were submitted during the sessions of the ad hoc group as well. And all of those documents are available on the website of VEREX, the special conference, and the ad hoc group. In terms of side events, there is one side event taking place this lunchtime that is hosted by the European Union in room 25. That is entitled Safeguarding Information Integrity in the BWC, 50 Years of Trust, Science and Security. As I said, that's taking place this lunchtime in room 25. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We reconvene at 3 o'clock.
Thank you.